All right, it's loading up the live stream. So Facebook, so we're going to Facebook Live. It's loading up. Alrighty. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Advocacy Activists' first quarterly Child Welfare Forum. Is entitled An Introduction to Both Sides, the System and the Community Building Bridges. If you have any story or you are interested in being a part of what we are doing, send us an email at advocacyactivists@gmail.com. Like us on Facebook, our public group page is Advocacy Activists. Please sign and share a petition, which could be accessed from our Facebook group page. It is the first pinned announcement. And most importantly, we are always in need of passionate individuals such as yourself to continue advocating for change within our systems. So just some quick Zoom rules of engagement. Please keep your muted till it's your turn to speak. Use the raise hand icon located under the reactions button, which is the one with the happy face at the bottom of your screen, if you're on a desktop or laptop, and or by clicking the three dots if you're on a mobile device, such as your cell phone. There will be a question and answer session, Q&A session at the end. Hold all questions until then, or if it is a really pressing question and you don't want to forget your question, you can place questions in the chat box. Please be informed that this is a recorded session and a safe place. Feel free to appear as you choose. So this is our disclaimer in accordance with the law. This forum may contain legal information. However, the discussions or statements made should not be considered as legal advice. Advocacy Activists is a family advocacy support group that assists families that are going through the family, dependency, and juvenile court systems. We are not attorneys, and we clearly encourage all participants to seek legal counsel when and wherever necessary. Alrighty, let's dive on in. In recognition of Foster Care Awareness Month and Mental Health Awareness Month, Advocacy Activists would like to kick off our first quarterly Child Welfare Forum that will allow the gatekeepers and employees within various systems and the families that are affected by those systems the opportunity to have an open, productive discussion to fuse a working relationship to begin to effectuate the necessary changes that are long overdue in and for the best interest of our children. Remember, children become adults. So let us set an example that we care and provide them with the best nurturing situation in which they can develop and grow and be successful individuals. Alrighty, now we're gonna watch the Foster Shop trailer.
Got to find out who I am. I got to know where I fit in.
Florida was the first state to fully privatize child welfare. When that happened, private companies sprung up across the state.
And these folks had very expensive CEOs and chief financial officers, a huge amount of expense created an overhead that never existed in the system before.
Life here was hectic. It was crazy. It was exactly the type of situation you would not want your child to be in.
No one's knowing the double lives they're living, and they could go across the street and make some money for sex to get what they need and to take care of the stuff that is not provided by the system. And it's become normalized.
The system's not working. The diagnosis is wrong. The preventions are not there. Something is really afoul.
Caring for children is a business. Business has a bottom line. Those kids are the dollars that you've got to get in.
If
if you really go through it, it kind of feels like they're kidnapping you in the middle of the night. They're putting you in a home that you don't know anybody, and they isolate you from your family members, and you're alone.
This is my closet. This is where I had to hide at. Angel appears to be experiencing some gender confusion. Strip, what are you doing? I'm a little girl.
It's like incarceration with training wheels, basically, is what they're going through.
No, you deserve to grow up in this place right here. Aging out of this place.
I'm telling you, we need to get out of there. This man raped me. Then you tell me, stop imagining things that are not there.
All of us felt like we were criminals. We're being disciplined for something that our parents did.
Like a sign on the street, like an within me, like a cloud in the sky, like you walking by.
Alrighty, so there we go. There we have it. Foster shock has actually showed us what it is that we're here for and what we all continue to fight for. And I try to look for some statistics, some current statistics that shows how bad it is with the removal of children, especially in the state of Florida. And the closest I can get was this chart on 2018. So they did a 10-year span and they did a comparison from 2008 to 2018. And there are different situations or placements in which a child can be placed when they're removed from their parents' care. You have non-relative foster family homes, you have relative foster homes, you have institutions, trial home visits, group homes, pre-adoptive homes, supervised independent living. So the non-relative foster family homes will be like probably an auntie or non-relative will be like a friend of auntie or uncle or family member or anyone that's willing to step up and take that child into their home, or they're registered foster parents. Relative foster homes will be like a grandmother, sister, brother, auntie, or anyone 18 or older. And sometimes they do not require those relatives to get certified, and other times they do. Then you have your institutions, which is, a criminal justice system or mental health systems. Then you have your trial home visits, where a child can go home on the weekends, but then they'll be in different places, they bounce around, because sometimes if that, say like the foster parent is going out of town and the child goes to stay with the mom, and then the child has to be back by judge's order on a Sunday, there's nobody there. So that child will stay in a temporary placement until they go back into the placement that they were in prior to being sent home on that weekend visit. So that right there is just traumatizing to be bounced around. Then you have group homes like His House in Miami, Safe Place in Broward, and I forget the name of the one here in Palm Beach County. So each county has group homes, and group homes are one of the common issues where children start to really be victimized and traumatized once placed in the system. Now we have pre-adoptive homes. Those are those homes whereas you can have a young lady that had baby out of wedlock, or somebody that's fleeing from domestic violence. There's many different scenarios in which somebody would give their child for option, and that option is theirs, and that option is available, which is one of the reasons why the system exists, so that people won't just dump babies out in the trash or anywhere. And I'm pretty sure most of you are aware of the safe places that are around our counties in every state, like the fireplace, the hospital, and so on and so forth, so that you will at least give that child an opportunity. So you have those pre-adoptive homes, and I'm not too versed on that, and that's something I can research, but definitely you can also research and see if you know somebody that maybe that would be an option for. Then you have supervised independent living. Most of these are kids that's nearly aging out of foster care, and I know of some that stay in the system because they have nowhere else to go, but as long as they're in school, they're allowed to continue living on, and they set them up with these type of residential settings as if you're in college, where you have like roommates and stuff like that in a big house. So there you have it. These statistics came from Child Welfare Information Gateway. It is a really great resource for a lot of information, because you have the Department of Human and Health Services, you have the Children's Bureau, and there's another child agency that are partnered to give this data. So now we're going to move into a best part and most important segment, and I'm going to introduce each speaker. We have 4 speakers with us today. I'll give them 2 minutes to introduce themselves on a personal level, and then we'll go into 15 minutes of discussion. So today we have Ms. Marie Franco, and she's the film director of the documentary that you just saw, Foster Shock. And she's a long-term guardian ad litem. She's a mother of 3. And Ms. Marie produced this powerful film to portray Florida's foster child system and when it comes to protecting children in its care. Foster Shock is a stunning documentary that gives viewers a close-up look at Florida's foster care system through the eyes of traumatized children who've depended on it, only to suffer more abuse, neglect, and pain. And that is how I actually found Ms. Marie. I was looking for some type of advocacy or some type of support group in my area at the time that I myself was going through my situation. And I came upon this documentary, and I've been sharing it ever since. So, Ms. Marie.
Hi, I'm Mary Frankel. And yes, I was responsible for Foster Shock. I was a guardian ad litem in Palm Beach County, I think for 9 years. And I had never done or never even considered doing a documentary before. But I was so disturbed at the cases that I had. Now, I'm just one person in a system, you know, like one volunteer out of hundreds, maybe thousands, I'm not even sure. And I only had a small number of cases, maybe, you know, 2 or 3 or 4 a year. And, you know, they would go and more would come, but I didn't represent, you know, like 50% of all the cases that came in, probably less than 1%. And I feel like I've overused that term shocked, but that's all I can relate to, is that I was shocked at every step of the way with every single child that I was involved in. And I think it's so important that we try to walk away from statistics and looking at these kids as statistics and look at them as individuals, because when you get to know and you build a relationship with a child that is in one of these horrific situations, the accountability that I've personally felt for the well-being of this one child, we should all be feeling for every single one of these children in our system. So my very first case was Carlos. He was an 11-year-old boy. He was in a therapeutic foster home and visiting his adoptive parents on the weekend. Well, the second time I met with him, his therapist was there, and he asked us to go for a walk. And on that walk, he told us he was being sexually abused. He used words only that no one could come up with the way he said this. You know, it was just flat out. There was no reason that I would even have considered that he wasn't telling the truth. So when we got back to the house, I asked the therapist, well, we have to call this into the child abuse hotline. And the therapist said, oh, you know what? I don't believe him. He's had a lot of trauma in his life. Go ahead and call it in if you want. Long story short, I called it in. It was just a fight all day that day, but we did get him out of that home. He had been sexually abused in that home for 2 years. And they still didn't believe him. They still didn't believe me. And they put another child in that home the next weekend. And that child had a guardian ad litem. And that child was raped the first weekend he was in the home. And now, 12 years later, we're in a lawsuit over this. And I've come to find out there's probably 7 or 8 boys that had been raped by this guy in this foster home. And I personally believe, it can't be proved, but I personally believed that the therapeutic foster mother was literally setting up a situation for this guy this 24-year-old ex-foster kid of hers. These, not only were these kids raped, they were forced to do sexual acts upon each other. I mean, it was horrific. Okay, long story short, and this is what gets me in every single case. No charges were ever filed. No thorough investigation was ever done, number one, against the perpetrator or the therapeutic foster mother. No charges were ever filed against the therapeutic foster mother or the perpetrator. And no one was held accountable at all in the system. So that case went on and on and on. It's still going on to this day. I am now Carlos's, I'm his legal representative, or, you know, I'm like his mom, basically. And he's doing well. He's really adorable. He's doing well. And he was mentally challenged when he was in that home, as all these kids were. So I think that upon all these other experiences I had led up to me, I had so many questions. Just for instance, and these are issues that I think we really need to tackle. There was one of my kids was in a group home on North Lake, and it was Vision Quest. And every time I called, or she called me, it was mayhem. And there was only 6 girls in this home, by the way, only 6. And the police were there, and it was just, I mean, this was going on and on and on. So I was so mad one day. I just went down to the Palm Beach Gardens Police Department, and I walked in, I said, I'd like a police report for every single time you've been at this home. And they said, oh my gosh, no one's ever asked us for this. Let me get, because this is a problem with us. Let me put something together for you. They gave me a piece of paper that basically stated that they had been to this home 700 times in 1 year. In 1 year for 6 girls. Think about our police resources. Think about the money that's costing us. So when I ended up doing foster shock, this wasn't till years later, I had taken all these experiences I had had and said, I've got to find out, you know, like, these are the questions. These are the big questions I want to ask these kids. I want to find out how many police visits to group homes there are, you know, across the state. And the average is well over 300, I found out. I want to talk about Baker Acts and what's happening to these kids when they get Baker Acted, because all this police intervention with these group homes leads to Baker Acts, because the police.
Okay, Ms. Marie, not to interrupt you, I'm sorry. We're just going to do quick introductions, and then we can go do a deeper dive into
Okay, sorry.
stories and stuff like that. So,
don't get me started.
I know you. I feel the passion. I do feel the passion.
Okay.
So our next speaker will be Sarah Kochko, and she was the organizer for Para Empathy Support Group in Broward County that allowed individuals to have a safe space to express themselves. Sarah has since moved on to adopt her granddaughter, and she spends most of her time raising her. Sarah?
You're on mute, Sarah.
Okay, is that better?
Yes.
Okay. I don't see. Okay. Am I okay?
Yes.
Okay.
You go ahead.
Hi, I am Sarah Krechkow. As Shakima said, when I was living in Broward County, I organized a support group called Per Empathy. It was a space for parents with children with either mental health or drug abuse issues to come and just feel like they're not alone and maybe find some resources that they didn't know about. We held this group for several years. I have since moved to Marion County, and I'm now at 70 years old raising my 5-year-old granddaughter. Unfortunately, her mom has some mental health issues and was not able to take care of her properly. We did go through ChildNet because my granddaughter was removed, and that was probably the worst week of my life. She was about 2 years old, and I was not going to allow her to go into the system in spite of my age. So right now she is thriving, she is happy, she is healthy, I'm happy to say. And I have since helped to organize a group here in Marion County, actually in Ocala, of other grandparents that are either raising or have adopted their grandchildren.
Alrighty, that's awesome. Thank you so much, Miss Sarah. And
You're
next,
welcome.
we're gonna have Dean Tong. Dean Tong is an American author, public speaker, consultant, and trial expert in the field of false child abuse allegations. He has consulted for the media on high-profile cases such as that of Elian Gonzalez, John Benet Ramsey, Kobe Bryant, and Michael Jackson. He is the author of 3 books inspired by his personal experience with being falsely accused of child abuse in 1985. In addition to testifying as an expert witness in 15 states and consulting as an expert for attorneys in court cases from all 50 states, he has appeared on numerous national broadcast shows and print stories on the topic of false and unfounded abuse accusations and child custody battles. He has also been quoted by numerous publications on the topic, including by the Chicago Defender, Christian Science Monitor, Rolling Stone Magazine, Boston Club, and the Denver Post. Mr. Dean?
Yeah, thanks for having me today. Yeah, I'm a consulting testimonial expert. I work high conflict cases all across America, alleged child abuse, sexual abuse, physical abuse, Munchausen by proxy, failure to thrive, failure to protect, basically all cases, all courts, high conflict child custody cases, parental alienation. I've been doing this professionally since 1995. I have testified in 15 states over 30 times. I am based out of Florida, but I get more cases out of Florida than I do in Florida. And my website, Abuse-Excuse, has been on the internet for 25 years, since 1996. So basically, I'm a busy guy. I work with parents accused, not just fathers falsely accused, but mothers. I won a big case for a mother down here in Daytona Beach in 2019, just 2 years ago, where DCF spent about $300,000, $400,000 to try and terminate her parental rights. She was falsely accused of coaching her son to falsely accuse his father of anal sodomy. So that case was in court for over 4 months at trial. And so my job is to try to help parents and attorneys, especially attorneys, with all due respect, most are not educated or trained to litigate and try these cases. Okay, you don't get this stuff in law school. My job is to try to help the attorney to connect the 3 dots in order to prevail in the case against the government. And that is the facts of the case, the science, and the law. The government has unlimited resources. Most falsely accused people, or even mothers whose kids have been molested, do not have those resources. So when you're in juvenile court, dependency court, oftentimes your attorney will not want to fight against DCF and ask you to basically sign a risk safety plan, to not go to trial, to consent to dependency, which means you're guilty of abuse, neglect, or abandonment, and basically go through a case plan where it may take a year to 15 months to get your kid back if you're lucky enough to do so. I'm a trial guy, so most of my cases go to trial. There's going to be a winner and a loser in my cases, and that's basically what I do. I average about 30 to 50 cases a year. Many more cases I'm consulted on, and either lawyers don't want to work with me or parents don't have the resources. And I might add that in juvenile dependency court or criminal court, where you're facing a loss of parental rights or loss of your freedom, with in a lot of my cases, sex offender registration, if you don't have the money, the state, the judge will oftentimes order the state to pay my fees as an expert. So you do have the right to due process. You do have the right to counsel and experts. And if you don't have the resources to fight back, oftentimes the judge will approve that right, because you do have the right to due process. That's very important. But that right to due process does not exist in family court. So unfortunately, in family court, you get as much justice as you can afford.
All righty, thank you so much for that, Dean. And the next person up, our last speaker is Ms. Christina Spuderis. Ms. Christina Spuderis has been a long time advocate for delinquent and dependent youth in Florida. For over the past 2 decades, Spuderis has worked tirelessly to defend the rights of children who are in the custody and supervision of state agencies or state contracted providers. Her diverse background includes child-related public policy reform, legislative reform, and state advocacy for dependent and delinquent youth. Ms. Spuderis.
Thank you, Shakima. And, you know, thank you for doing this. This is something that's so important, and I'm glad that you're taking the lead, and I hope that you get together to join with you, because this is so important right now. And when I do talk a little bit later, I'll tell you why you're at the right time, perfect timing. This is the perfect storm to have this kind of advocacy. So thank you for that intro. I am an attorney, but I am now the executive director of Florida's Children First. And Florida's Children First is a statewide organization in Florida. We're a nonprofit, and we are made up of, our board of directors created Florida's Children First in 2002. And it really was a lot of child advocates across the state that were working on protecting children's rights of children that are being harmed in care. And they were working case by case all around the state, and they come together once in a while and start to realize that these issues are happening in other places. It's not unique to this county or one other county. So those are systemic issues. So they thought, you know, we could keep on handling one case at a time, or we can try to do system reform. So they gathered together and formed Florida's Children First. I joined in 2009, so I've been the executive director for the past 12 years. And in that role, we started also a youth advocacy organization called Florida Youth Shine. I have in my background a picture of them that I brought with them. They were at the Capitol with me. And right behind me is Senator Nancy Dieter. That's who was their champion at the time. So I love this picture, but this is a group of our youth. But here's the thing that I'm really going to be talking about today is that Florida Youth Shine was created in 2006. The very first bill that they passed, that was passed based on their advocacy, was that year. And it was because it was the first time the legislature, they went room to room and talked to all the, you know, the many senators and many representatives just about their life in foster care. And at that time, they had one topic, you know, and that's the thing you have to do is hone it down to your 1 or 2 big asks. But they had one issue, which was after they've aged out of foster care, they can't get access to their records. And if they want to join the Army and it says list the last 5 residences, they don't even have the addresses of the 5 residences. They don't have access to where their brothers and sisters are because they were separated in care. So they got the records bill. And that was the very beginning. But I will tell you, it was a handful of kids that came to Tallahassee to speak. It wasn't hundreds, it was under 10. And it was an awakening for the legislature to listen to people who are affected by the system. And your time is ripe for parents and families to be involved in that process. So thank you so much for inviting me today.
Thank you so much for that, Ms. Christina. Yes, it's a pleasure to have each and every one of you here. I've been able to meet at least 3 of you all, and welcome Dean to the team. Hopefully we all can get together and actually start to formulate changes along with other parents in the state and out into other states. So now this segment here, you can each get 15 minutes and speak to your experiences, your perspective, what things have you seen, what things you see we can do different, any resources that parents can use, and even attorneys that's in this fight. Because I know there are some really, really good attorneys, but they're not sure which way to go because the law says one thing, but when it comes to dependency court, child welfare, it seems like those laws don't apply. So any kind of resource or any assistance, anything that you can offer to our audience. So we're gonna start off with Miss Marie. You can speak to your perspective from the short-term to the long-term effects on the youth that you were able to effectuate through this.
You're on mute, Mary. Sorry.
That was probably good. Hi, so, there's so much to talk about. And, like what I was saying in my movie, it's so important that we start conversations. And I thought that's kind of what the goal of Foster Shock was for me, start conversations about education, about foster care. So to really start to understand what's happening with the system. So when I was talking about group homes, the fact that the police resources, were going to all these group homes, and because the police resources were going there and they had to break up the fights, then all of a sudden these kids start getting Baker Act. Now, Baker Acting, I'll just go through a couple things because I don't really have the answers, but right now I can tell you for a fact that, and I'm not saying it's just because of group homes, but it's the system and it's the way the system handles these children and their lack of, it's not only care. I mean, most of them do care. It's a lack of education, a lack of skill set. But what's happening is all these kids are now getting Baker Acted. And in 2019, I just found out that 37,000 children in the state of Florida, foster kids, were Baker Acted in 2019. And that's so staggering. I have to even say to myself, like, could that be true? Could that absolutely be true? I just don't know. But yet I know that Carlos was Baker Acted over 30 times. I know most of the kids I had over 9 years, once they were Baker Acted, they were probably Baker Acted up to 10 times within a few years. So, I mean, what I'm getting at is there's so many areas that are so egregiously horrible for these children. And yet they continue to happen. It's happening more and more. And on top of that, think about the money that is costing us. I mean, our budget in the state of Florida, I don't know, but when I did the movie, it was $3 billion. It was actually 2.9, but I didn't want to exaggerate and say 3. So that's $3 billion in the state of Florida. On top of that, we have police services, we have mental health services, we have all the money that's going into these state psychiatric hospitals. We have it's just on and on and on. And then none of them are graduating from high school. I think it's less than 10% right now that graduate from high school. Less than 2% will even earn a college degree. And most of them end up in the prison system. They're on welfare. We have over $93 billion. This is an old statistic, and that's nationwide, in lost tax revenue and social services. And I think that's quadruple that much money. I basically think that foster care is costing our society the most money of any, in failure of any other system in the country. So long story short, like how do we fix it? And, it just has to start with accountability and transparency, because like Shakima just said, she was hard for her to find statistics. It's very hard. It's all just out there. It's not transparent. There's no accountability. And unless somebody's going to say, I'll be held accountable for the fact that I have a 40% turnover rate in my case management. I'll be held accountable when 5 children die and like 15 are raped in my, I want to hold myself accountable. I hold myself accountable to each child that I was a guardian ad litem for. So I think we need to really demand accountability, transparency, and I think we need to get together and really go after this on a legislative arena. So that's what I think. So thank you.
Alrighty. Sarah, do you have any perspective as to your experience to having to go and fight for your granddaughter and the experience of adopting your daughter? You're on mute. You're on mute. There you go.
Okay, gotcha. Just to go into it a little bit, my daughter was adopted through a foreign adoption. She was almost 2 years old. We do not know what she experienced the first 2 years of her life. But I can tell you that she does have trauma-based mental health issues. Because of that, she has experienced more trauma through her life, even though she was not in the system. Her original situation caused damage. So I can only imagine what children that are going through trauma in the foster care system are encountering and how that damages them for life. When she was unable to care for her daughter and her daughter was removed and put in foster care, I knew what damage that was going to cause. So I advocated to adopt her. It was a little bit of a fight, but luckily we had an awesome judge in Broward County who sided with the grandparents, even though grandparents don't always have rights to the children. Sometimes the children go to other circumstances. From what I understand, my granddaughter was promised to the foster mom after a week that she was going to be able to adopt her, which was never going to happen as far as my fighting for her. I just, in my experience, children that have trauma and mental health issues that are continually Baker Acts don't help them. And therapy, my daughter was in therapy most of her life. Unless they want help, it's not going to help them. Unfortunately, she was of the mind to self-medicate, which is never a good thing. That's the very reason why I organized a support group. I also did volunteer work at South Florida Wellness Network in Broward County, which is an awesome organization for youth who are at risk. My daughter did serve time in the juvenile justice system. Did really not get the help that she needed at that point either. She still struggles to this day, and she's almost 26 years old. Happily, because of my intervention with my granddaughter, which not every grandparent is able to do financially or mentally or physically, my granddaughter is not having any kind of mental problems or issues, and she's happy and thriving. And like I said before, I have organized a group here locally of children who are in a like situation so that she does not feel like she is different. The questions are already coming up. The other day when I went to pick her up at the school, because she just graduated VPK, yay. One of the little boys who she's friends with asked me, "Why do you pick her up every day?" And I said, "Well, it's because she lives with me." And he said to me, "Doesn't she have a mom?" And I said, "Well, yes, she has a mom, but her mom doesn't live with her. She lives with us. And it's okay. There are different kinds of families," which they actually did learn in VPK. So he totally understood. But I can see already that the questions are starting, and I'm sure that kids in foster care hear the same kind of questions. Why don't you live with your parents? Why don't you live with your mom? And that's got to be traumatizing in and of itself. And pretty much that's my story.
Thank you so much, Sarah, for that insights. Yeah, it's definitely a difficult thing but sometimes
Shakima, one other thing I'd like to add. There needs to be a way for grandparents who are not able to adopt to find resources if they are not financially able to take care of the children. That's a big issue. That's it.
Yes.
Thanks.
Yes, thank you so much, Sarah. That's why I had you to come on, because I know a lot of families, and it's a big thing in Broward and some other counties here in the state of Florida. Like Hillsborough has the second highest removals in the state, and for some reason their goal is not to keep the kids with family members. I've been doing research like Ms. Marie said earlier, and it's so hard to really dive down. While I was doing some research, it's like you can tell the data is fluffed, because I was looking at the disproportionate data and disparities, and it's fluff. You can tell it's fluff. So it's really hard to find the data that really expresses what we're going through here in the state of Florida. And just a known fact that the state of Florida first privatized foster care. We were the first to privatize foster care. And it seems like the state of Florida, we're always the first when it comes to negative things and the last when it comes to positive stuff. So the goal here is to hopefully eventually have these conversations and start drawing in those leaders that needs to be at the table with us, or we need to be at the table with them to start making these changes. And grandparents are a commodity. I grew up with my grandparents, and I turned out pretty great. We all have different experiences and stories. We all grew up in the same home, but then we all could come out differently because we all experienced our traumas and life situations differently, and how people address us, it varies, and it makes a big difference. And to have a grandparent that can step up is good to say that. But then when you have a system that's like, no, we don't recognize you because you're too old, or you don't have enough money, or it takes a village to raise a child, whoever has enough, and I'm really grateful that you're able to be here to share that part of your story, and hopefully incite others to push forward, because I know it wasn't easy for you to just walk in and get your granddaughter. I'm pretty sure it was a fight. All right, next we have Dean. Dean, you can speak as to, what you've seen. If you want, you can speak to your personal situation, which led you to doing what you're doing. All right.
Yeah, what I haven't seen, really little or nothing. To piggyback Mary's argument on accountability of the system, many of you may not know, some of you may know that the Florida DCF, all CPS agencies in all 50 states, enjoy what's called 11th Amendment immunity. Okay, that means they have sovereign absolute immunity. You cannot sue the DCF of Florida or CPS, any agency in any state, as a governmental official agency for monetary damages in federal court. You can sue the individual caseworkers in their personal individual capacity, but you cannot sue the state agency in federal court for money. So to my knowledge, Florida DCF, no CPS agency, any of the 49 states have waived their 11th Amendment immunity. They have absolute immunity just like a judge does on the bench, okay? So until that happens, good luck on gaining accountability. Other laws I would like to see change. Shakima, you just mentioned it takes a village to raise a child. Well, let's look at that. Let's look at Hillary Clinton and her husband, Bill Clinton, who passed the Adoption and Safe Families Act of 1997, which Hillary's Village, if you will, she wrote the book, right? It Takes a Village, which is supposed to make reasonable efforts to a reunification with the family. Well, if we're shoveling kids right to foster care, are we really making reasonable efforts toward reunification? So there's a process called ICPC, okay, Interstate Compact for Placement of Custody of Children, in other states, where if a sibling or an uncle or an aunt or a grandparent exists in Georgia or Tennessee or Massachusetts, if they are a viable relative to take the kids, kinship care trumps strangers. Kinship care trumps foster care. Foster care is a nightmare. It doesn't work. It's a failed experiment. There are 500,000 children in this country in foster care. Now, you'll get the exception to the rule, like Dave Pelzer, the author of the book A Child Called It, who became a successful best-selling New York Times selling author. Clearly the exception to the rule. So, it's not working. I'm not a politician, even though I did run for state house in Florida in 1994 in Duval County in Jacksonville. I do have a little knowledge of the political system. Okay. The point is, this is about family, right? We need to get back to family. And when you're going up against a behemoth like the DCF, and I can assure you, I'm in court almost as much as lawyers are as an expert, it's overwhelming. It's a nightmare. There are 15 people on one side of the bench, and you're there with your lawyer, and that's it. Welcome to the world of the government. This is called in loco parentis. The state is the parent. That's what this is called in law. All right. So there are laws. It starts with the 1974 Child Abuse Prevention and Treatment Act, also known as CAPTA, also known as the Mondale Act, for former Vice President Walter Mondale, who recently passed away. And that was the law that began this system almost 50 years ago, okay, known as the Mondale Act. It basically allowed anonymous tipster calls to 1-800-96-ABUSE, which is our toll-free hotline here in Florida. It allowed for the government to accept these calls and dispatch their workers to the scene of the alleged crime. All right. It also gave the government sovereign immunity, absolute immunity on the 11th Amendment. It developed the National Center on Child Abuse, Neglect, and Data System. Dr. David Finkelhor out of New Hampshire is the editor of the Journal of Child Maltreatment. So he tabulates these statistics for all 50 states. There are monetary incentives here for the government to take your kids, foster care. There's a monetary incentive. There's Title 4D and Title 4E of the Social Security Act. There are monetary incentives. Okay, this has to be repealed. 20 years later, after CAPTA in 1994, our current president, who was then U.S. Senator Joe Biden, authored the Violence Against Women's Act, also known as VAWA, 28 U.S.C. 2265. So a woman or a man, but usually a woman, can make a statement of fear, threaten bodily harm, and guess what? You're removed from your kids in a New York minute. And when you're removed from your kids, based on that hearsay, there's a no contact ruling. If you text, if you email, if you post an OFW or on Facebook, you'll be arrested. That civil restraining order turns criminal. So again, we are augmenting the admissibility of hearsay, not just from children, but from adults. And we're in a war of words. Okay, so then 3 years later, we get the Adoption Safe Families Act by the Clintons in 97. Okay, you have 15 to 22 months. That's it. People don't realize when the government is breathing down your neck and now they've taken your kids and your kids are placed with strangers and foster care, you're on a clock. You're on a clock. It's not just resources. You're on a clock to be able to substantially comply with the case plan that the government wants to hoops you to jump through, and the judge is going to force you to comply with that. And if you don't comply with that clock, you lose. Yeah, it's Mike Tyson time here. We're in for a 15-round knockout fight. And welcome to my world. And this is what I do for a living. This is what I've been doing for 25 years.
Awesome. That is very informational, insightful. It touches on a lot of things, like the why is this happening, and the who and the where. And I like the fact that you said that it needs to be repealed. So maybe that's something that advocacy activists and some other local groups that I am partnering with can actually consider, because what I'm finding with a lot of parents is a lot of them are scared, even to come on a forum today, or even to have during the COVID. Nobody wanted to do groups over Zoom because people are afraid. That's what the system does. They put and instill that fear in you so that you will not reach out for help. Whereas in my situation, I reached out for help. I had a lawyer tell me that they don't like a woke Black, you know what? And I didn't understand that at the time. I had another lawyer tell me, what your experience is the Black experience. And I didn't understand that either. Because I'm like, my case wasn't even based on abuse or anything. It was based on retaliation. So with that said, that's an eye opener, and that's something definitely new, because I've been doing the research for the last 6 years. And like Sarah says, the child has trauma. My kids are home. My kids have been raped. They've been beaten. They've been dragged by police and anything and everything you can think of. And the people in the system did mention that they would do exactly that. I started the support group because there was no other groups. I've attended so many different types of support groups, but none really focus on the child and the family. So that's why I started Advocacy Activists. And a lot of those parents that's been in that, we've all been arrested. So it's hard to get jobs, like you mentioned before. It's just hard, it's mentally debilitating to see your child that was once stable to be so unstable. And then for them to tell you the things that you know they learn from the system, like, oh, I could call the police on you, or I could do what I want. They say I can do what I want. You're unfit mother. For them to say things like that is very mentally debilitating to the mom too. So there's trauma all around. And the goal is to start getting some type of, like Sarah said, therapy. I think we've been to over 28 therapists in the last 6 years, and there's no real solution. So what would be the solution? And that's why we're having these discussions, to educate and bring different perspectives together so that we can put solutions in place. So with that said, that segues right into Miss Christina, and I know she has some really good resources for us. Miss Christina.
Thank you. So I'm going to take a little different approach because I want to talk about, as I said before, the importance of what you're doing. There's a lot of problems in the system. I could go on and on about that, but that's not what I want to talk about right now. I want to talk about how you can make changes in the system, because you can. So there's two things that have come into play now. And right now, today, there is a focus on the importance of parents' involvement. And this is really what you all know is that, excuse me, it has been common, far too often, it is common that parents of children that are involved in the child welfare system are treated, as you know, with disrespect, distrust by caseworkers, GALs, foster parents, DCF, the courts, etc. I mean, the system players look at you as the villains. And when you do see the data, which I'm going to help you walk through some of the data, Shakima, later on, because there is accurate data you can get to, but you have to know how to get to it. When you look at the data, you will see that most children are not removed from parents because they harmed them. They didn't physically abuse them. They aren't sexually assaulting them. They are either stuck in a situation like domestic violence, or they have mental health or substance abuse issues. But all of those are things that people can be helped with. So you don't have to remove children to make sure that children are in a safe environment. And parents are the villains wrongly. So this is a recognized problem in child welfare, and it's a priority to make the change to that empower parents and the children in care to have a voice and to be at that table. So two things happen at the same time. Now, there's an effort to use the dollars, the resources that are coming into the states now to help children stay with their parents. And then a second is the recognition that people who make decisions, all of those policymakers, the people at the top of the agency, you know, our lead agencies and DCF and the legislature, they need to listen to the people whose lives are affected by the decisions they make. And we now have this buzzword is called those with lived experience. And so you have that lived experience, as Dean was talking about his lived experience. Mary has lived experience in what she observed and what she went through trying to fight for a child. And of course, you know, being a parent to a grandchild is lived experience. So you have unique knowledge that you can bring to the table. Now, the feds they're the ones that send this dollars to the states, but they don't send them without requirements and conditions. So the first change, using resources to keep kids in the family, is based on new federal law that changes the funding for states and promotes services and supports to families to keep children with their parents. It's called the Family First Prevention and Services Act. And The Federal Health and Human Services Children's Bureau has the primary responsibility to administer the federal programs that support state child welfare services. So they issue things called informational memorandums, okay? And they write these guidances to state child welfare leadership. And this includes information on how to implement that law called Family First Prevention and Services Act. And I've sent a memorandum to Shakima, and I hope she'll share it with her group, that's issued by the Children's Bureau that focuses on strengthening families and unnecessary parent-child separation. So it's a memo on focus on strengthening families. They have made a call to action for states to act on this vision to prevent child maltreatment and unnecessary removal of children from their homes. So they're looking at it and they're looking at the numbers of how many families are intact instead of how many kids are coming into care, instead of also how many kids are coming into care. But the second issue is what we're really here about. The importance of listening to people that have that lived experience. There is another memorandum by the Children's Bureau that focuses on making the parents and children involved in the child welfare system that have a key role in improving the system and in keeping the families together. That's another memorandum that I'm sharing with you called I call it the memo on the family and youth voice. And I'm quoting from it. It says it's absolutely critical to strengthen our efforts to listen to the families and youth served by the system and integrate their voices into all aspects of child welfare planning and improvement. Now, when you read this very long memo, it's really uplifting because they're recognizing, okay, you've got the parents that are actively involved today in the child welfare system that are fighting to get their kids back. Those are the people that have to be, and it's very clear when you see this memo, they need to be involved in every part of the decision-making process. They have to be at the table, they have to be given the credence and the credibility, that they're an important part, not a bad person that has, that we want to keep out of this. We want to bring them in. So this is not in action yet because we're going to have to work on making that in action. But Florida DCF has also made a commitment in writing, okay, which doesn't mean in action. Written, that includes the parents in making system improvements. They have to give a child and family services plan that's a 4-year plan or a 5-year plan, to the feds, and they did. It goes from 2020 to 2024, and they're making it clear they want to have family involvement, parents involvement. And that was influenced also by that Family First Prevention Services Act. So I will tell you that having something written and having something become a procedure is a whole different thing. We have to watch that. We call ourselves a watchdog, and that's what that means. We have to watch and see how much they do, because in that Family Children's Services Plan they did, it's way too many pages, almost over 100 pages. I didn't provide that, but they have a section there that they said they spoke to the first formed parent advocacy group. I don't know where they are, and I don't know who they are. As far as I know, you're the first formed one, but this one, they said they used their voice when they wrote this plan. Then they listed all of the players later on, all the key participants that were involved in making the plan. And I read every single name and there was no parent group. So either there was a couple people they pulled in and they called it that or not, but they don't have active, there's not an active parent advocacy organization in the state of Florida and we need to make sure that one happens and gets a voice. Sorry for the clock. It's 12 o'clock. So how do we get included? How can they be included? Well, I go back in time. The only experience I have, which is a really good one, is working with Florida Youth Shine. When I started with Florida's Children First in 2009, they had been in existence for 3 years. Okay. And there was exactly 29 youth that were already gathered together in the 3-year plan. So it took 3 years to gather 29 youth. And we kept changing their ages to making it, 14 to 24, then to 25, then to 26, because the kids were getting older and we weren't getting more kids. So to change that, we had to start working on making chapters around the state. So ultimately, we now have 14 chapters of youth that are involved in the child welfare system or have aged out of the system, ages 14 to 24. We're back to 24. And that meet in chapters around the state, and then we convene them together in quarterly meetings, and they annually go and meet legislators in Tallahassee during Children's Week, but they also meet with key decision makers in their own communities all year long. So they can talk to DCF leadership, they can talk to, a public defender's office, they can talk to the parent attorneys, they can do trainings, they work with case management and independent living. And it depends on the group, where they are and what their interest and involvement is. But they have become a voice, a true empowered voice for children. And now we need to do the same for parents. There are other states that have very active parent advocacy organizations. There have been a parent's Bill of Rights that have been enacted in other states. We don't have anything like that. The legislature is no different right now, I'm telling you this, than DCF or the other people like case managers, etc., who look at the parents of children in foster care as the bad people, the villains, the ones who did harm. And so we have to put a different face on that. We have to show parents that have struggled, that have been wrongly accused or improperly had their children removed, that things happen to the kids that are far worse than ever happened in the home when you place them in foster care in many situations. And so that is a promise we make. We make an implied promise. If we're taking a child from their parents, we're traumatizing them, number one. That's absolutely have to recognize that whole action is trauma. So we're causing trauma, the state, and we make a promise to that child. It's an implied promise, but it's logical. How else could it be that we're going to place you in a place that's better than where you are now? Well, we don't. Mary knows. She did a documentary about it.
Yeah, the problem, Christina, with your model or your methodology or your program, with all due respect, is there's no money. There's no resources coming into the family, to the parents who are fighting the system. Okay, and whether it's my services as an expert or an attorney who I'm working with to try to help that falsely accused mother or father retrieve their kids back out of foster care or from the government to prevent a dependency, to prevent a TPR, there's no money for these parents to
No,
fight.
there is now, actually. That's the whole point of this new funding, and that's what I'm saying.
I'd like to see that.
Okay, well, I'll be glad to share it with you, but when it's your turn to talk, I'll let you talk. It's my turn right now.
36 years I've been involved. I don't see this published information. Where's this information?
I will share you the legislation, and the money is flowing into Florida. So yes, there is.
It's not flowing to the parents, I can tell you, because they call me 24/7, 365.
Okay, well, I'm not here to fight with you because I'm on your side. So if you think that I'm a representative of the state, I'm not. I'm an advocate, a child and now parent advocate, because I realize the importance of including the parents in this whole picture. But there is money going for intervention and prevention, and it absolutely is supposed to be used. So yes, there is money. Now, implementing things properly, that's another story of which we all recognize. But don't say there's not the dollars, because they're putting a lot of dollars into it.
I would need to see your published information, ma'am.
Yes. Yes, and I will share that one. I can share that document when we're finished. It's something fairly new that came in with the Family First and Prevention Services Act. So you know how it is when it comes to rolling out money. When the government wants their money, they take it very quickly. And when they have to give money, it takes a while to roll it out.
Let me tell you how much a contested litigious case costs for a family.
Why don't you wait till it's your turn to say that, okay?
Yeah, so,
Let's be
at the
fair,
end-
Dean. It's only fair. Let me finish because I don't know what you're fighting me on. This is actually.
Ma'am, I'm not fighting you. I'm fighting what you're
Okay.
talking about.
Okay, so at the end, I'll share that document and then we can go over that and have this more for the discussions, but, all right.
Okay.
Continue.
Anyway, how can parents get involved without I'm talking about as an advocacy organization to advocate for the rights. And if you don't think there's money, then you need to gather together and you need to go and sit and talk to your legislators and tell them there is not proper funding or there's not proper services that they're actually doing. So there, who knows what, follow the money, where is the money going and why isn't it being used for us and for our needs? Okay, that's what you need to advocate for. So why do you do that? You have to show up everywhere. You have to organize. You go to community alliance or other public meetings where child welfare is being discussed, and that's in your community every day, every month. Meet with influential people. You've got legislators, representatives, and senators in your communities. Let them know who you are and show them your parents that care and are fighting for your children and for your family to stay together. And ask them to invite you to meetings that you might not be aware of that are happening. Find your allies. There are allies locally and nationally. You are not alone and you are not the first. You can learn from your peers. Involvement with local lead agencies, community-based providers, not fun, never fun. It's not fun for the kids either. Let me tell you something. When our youth organization, Florida Youth Shine, comes and speaks, they don't come and say, well, I want to talk to you about my life in foster care. It's just been wonderful. We love where we're living and we're treated care wonderfully. They don't say that at all. They say things can be a lot better. We're living in group homes. Our possessions are taken. We're separated from our siblings. We have no privacy. I can't visit my parents. They make my parents jump through hoops to come and see me. It's not right. I don't live a normal life. That's what the kids say. And do you think that the lead agencies usually like being put on the spot? They don't. So no, you have to recognize you're not going to be happy. They're not going to be happy to have you there, but you have to have a seat at the table. And that means show up. Also, public information, newspapers, TV, radio. We can show you how to do that. There are reporters that cover child welfare, and you can develop relationships with them. You read an article that talks about child welfare. I don't care what it's about, whether it's from the child's point of view, whether it's the system's point of view. If somebody wrote about that, call them up. Call that reporter up or write to that reporter and say, I'd like to talk to you about my view on child welfare from the parent's point of view. You'll get someone that'll call you back and you'll become a resource. And then do training, offer to do training. Tell people your stories, caseworkers, foster parents, group home staff, GALs, that's the kind of thing. There are national resources and you need to join it. There's called the Birth Parent National Network. I gave the link to Shakima. It's amazing. They have an attached flyer. They're going to have a webinar tomorrow. So if you can get that to them, Shakima, and let them see if they can join up, it's absolutely amazing. Family Voices United is another national resource. And there's a link for that I've shared. And also the Child Welfare Information Gateway, parent support group resources, that whole thing, you got to take a look at that. There's lots of support groups out there to do this. In Florida, the Florida Bar has a public interest law section of Parent Advocacy Committee. I've given the contact information to Shakima on who that person is. They gather people together. They want parents to talk to them, to advocate, because they advocate for changes in the law too. So, and also there's 2 offices of regional counsel. I know that oftentimes you are not given the type of quality representation that you deserve, but they're trying to gather together now panels of parents to have the parent voice and to have a face and to have a seat at the table. So be happy to help in that regard. And one thing I am good at is organizing, and I wish you the best. Thank you for letting me speak.
Yes, thank you very much, Ms. Christina. Dean, do you have anything that you would like to add, or any more perspective that you like to give, or any solutions to some of the things that have been discussed?
Well, sure. First of all, I would discourage people from talking to the press if you're dealing in the court of law. And you certainly better get the green light from your attorney before you start litigating your case in the court of public opinion when you're in a court of law. I can tell you the DCF doesn't like it, the CPT doesn't like it, and judges clearly don't like it. Okay. And look, I'd like to see the published information on this so-called money that's coming in to the parents to fund lawyers and experts like myself to fight back against the system that is portraying you as a monster. Make no mistake, you are presumed guilty. You have to prove a negative to prove your innocence. Welcome to my world. Okay, abuse-excuse.com. I belong to the Justice Administrative Commission out of Tallahassee, our capital in Florida. Justiceadmin.org. Justiceadmin.org. Okay, and the Justice Administrative Commission, they provide money. They provide real funds to attorneys and experts to help people fight back against the system who is taking your kids, who may send you to prison and lifelong sex offender registration. Okay, so a judge has to declare you, the accused, indigent for costs. It's called IFC, is the acronym. Okay, so in law, that's called informal pauperous or poor. You have to be declared poor. And that means you basically have no active checking or savings account. You own no clear title to a houseboat, motorcycle, RV, or car. You have no IRAs, bank stocks, annuities, cryptocurrency. Basically, Whitney Houston, you have nothing. That's what you have to prove to the judge in a financial affidavit in order to get help here. And let me tell you, as a guy who goes up against the system for a living, and I've been doing this for 3.5 decades, I think I'm pretty experienced on this. You know, they have unlimited resources. Most accused do not. Most accused are not Michael Jackson, who's able to get out of jail on a $3 million bail bond back when Michael was indicted in 2003. I was at Michael's trial in 2005 as a media expert commentator for Court TV. So, you know, this is the real world we're dealing with, and people need help. Parents need help. That help comes in resources. Lawyers are not cheap. My services are not cheap. Those of psychologists and psychiatrists are not cheap. Okay. And I haven't even touched on the medical field. Shaken baby syndrome. When you get a medical child abuse case, or mother who's been falsely accused of Munchausen syndrome, what's now called factitious disorder imposed upon another nightmare. Okay. And the system is just all too eager to take your kids. Trust me.
Alrighty, so definitely everyone brings their own perspective from their own experience within the system. And that's why we're here today to have this discussion, because whenever I walk up to people and I say child welfare, it's like I'm cursing. I said a bad word, and it's just like a lot of resistance and a lot of pushback, especially from our legislators and local officials. Like Broward County was funding some child welfare stuff a while back, and when I approached them about it, they pulled their dollars. I bring the data, I research, I brought information from parents on how that resource.
It's the fox guarding the hen house. It's the fox guarding the hen house. You have to know that. From the Florida bar to the legislature to DCF in the trenches to the judges on the bench. It's the fox guarding the hen house. Fact.
Yes. Anyone else, Maria, Sarah, have anything to add?
How, people are asking me all the time, what can I do? What can we do to change the system? And yeah, there's Christina, like there's things out there that I don't know, but I just don't know. I mean, come on. We can talk about this all day long, but my question is, how do we come up with a comprehensive package that's actually doable? Because I don't see it. I just don't see it.
Look,
I mean, do you guys have any
the
because
Florida
I feel like an idiot not being able to say, this is what we need to do.
The Florida legislature approved citizen review panels over a decade ago. It didn't work.
Doesn't work.
It did not work. Okay. So Florida doesn't really want to listen to the rights of parents. The other 49 states don't really want to listen to the rights of parents. You have the right to prove a negative in a court of law. Okay.
How do you suggest we go about getting them to listen, Dean? Like, what solution would you be able to give us
Yeah,
that would be
is there a
effective?
solution or is there not?
Yeah,
I mean,
look, I was an activist back in the 90s, 30 years ago. I've written 3 books on this topic, okay? I've been doing this for a long, long time. I've done the Tallahassee thing. I've been there, done that. I did that in the 90s. I ran for politics in the state. You know, you're up against a bureaucratic system here, okay? And they hold all the cards. And it's like the case I defended for a mother 2 years ago in Volusia County in Daytona Beach, when the state of Florida spent about $300,000 to $400,000 to try to terminate her parental rights for coaching her little 4-year-old boy who allegedly falsely accused his father of anal sodomy. Never happened. We proved that in court. But the bottom line was this mother had to jump through hoops for a year and a half before she got to court. And then it took us 4 months to finally convince a judge that the DCF was wrong, and they were wrong. 2 caseworkers were fired. The DCF attorney was fired. The DCF director was fired. That's what happens in these cases when the state loses, okay? And try to find a dream team, if you will, lawyers and experts who can litigate against that. Good luck.
Well,
You've done a lot of work for a long time, but you sure haven't changed the system. So how is it effective?
I'm not here, ma'am.
Have an approach to be effective.
Ma'am, I'm not here to change the system. I'm here to help.
Well, we are. That's what we're here for. We're here to change
when
the
I'm
system.
talking. Really?
No,
You're talking when I'm talking.
Let's be respectful of each other because this is being live
Talk
streamed on
about
Facebook.
disrespectful? Yeah, Christine.
Okay, let's calm down
because
because this is being live streamed on Facebook. So let's be professional because this is being live streamed right now.
Yeah.
And
So
we're gonna bring information
look,
and
my
solutions
job, my job is not to change the system. My job is to help win one case at a time. And let me tell you, there's no shortage of cases.
All right.
The most effective way to change the system is doing systemic reform. One case at a time is just one case at a time. So we're here to gather together to learn how to give a strong voice to people that haven't had a voice at the table. And that's my goal. So
you see if that voice works in a court of law.
All right. So like you said, we're here to work together and have these conversations and bring different perspectives and experiences so that we can figure out what it is we can do as a community. Because you have the system and they have themselves and they have each other and they have all the policies and things that they're bringing into play. However, what are we on the other end, the parents that you represent, the people that are shown in the foster child documentary, and all the people and the children that Miss Christina works with, and the grandparents like Sarah, like what can we do on a lot of end? And that's what we're here to figure out and discuss and come together. Because we all are advocates within the system. Even being a grandparent, you're advocating because she had to go through that process of fighting for her grandchild. So as advocates for the system, we're coming together to have these discussions to give different cues and things that can help people as they are watching. So they'll know, okay, I identified with this and I identify with that in the system. Then we're also bringing that perspective on the legal end or on the in the system part, because some of you all are in the system. So you're more in those meetings and you can see things and hear things that you can bring back to give pointers to help us as the community and the parents that's going through this. So with that, if anybody, Sarah, do you have anything that you would like?
I have just one thing to say concerning that. Yes, we did have to fight for our granddaughter. When we were in court, the DCF workers tried to tell the judge that we were not interested in adopting our granddaughter. We were very lucky in the fact that we had a judge that did not believe them. So yeah, the system is broken.
Yes, it definitely is. So that said, does anyone in the in the room, do you have any questions, any statements, anything that you would like to say at this time?
Yeah, I'll just say I appreciate you all being advocates. I'm not one. I'm not an advocate. I'm not an activist. I'm an expert. I have to be on the 50-yard line. I have to be objective. I have to be independent, neutral, and objective, impartial. Okay. And so this is a system where take no prisoners. This is a war. There's no 50-yard line here. There's a winner and a loser. You either get your kids back from the system or you don't.
Shakima, I just want to say thank you so much because I love this discourse. I love this conversation. There's nothing I don't like about this because we're just talking about one of the most important things that we can talk about in our country right now, as far as I'm concerned. So the passion and the fighting and the difference of it's all good and it spurs more communication and more discussion. And we all need to be talking about foster care. It's okay to disagree. It's okay to be passionate and upset and as we all are. So I just want to thank you, Shakima. I mean, you are such a trooper, what you've gone through and the way you've stuck it out and the way you've stayed with your mission and what you're doing. I'm just really impressed with you. Thank you so much.
Okay, my name is Karen Cooper, and I've been very quiet through this whole Zoom conference. And I've heard everybody's opinions and thoughts, but I am a grandmother that have custody of 2 of my kids. I am a foster parent that has 6. And there is no help. Once you take responsibility of these children, they're thrown at you and you're on your own. No, the system does not help people. That's why we have so many children in the system. No, the system do not help people. That's why we have so many juveniles in the criminal system, or they're just running up and down the streets lost, don't know what they're going or what they're going to do or where their lives are going to be. And then it's a person like me that takes in my grandkids because their families or parents was not able to take care of them. And once I got them, that was it. The system had no more to do with me. I've been a foster parent for 12 and a half years, and I've had kids go in and out my house. Some did prospective things or in college or in the military, and some are not. But at least I was here for them. But I did not have support from the system. I did it on my own from the loving heart of my heart for me, for the children that I care for, because we have to remember the children are our future. Those are the ones we have to depend on to take care of us. And if we're not guiding them and directing them in the right way and supporting them, then who's going to take care of us when we can't take care of ourselves?
You're right, Miss Karen. Definitely, you're right. And I'm grateful for you. Oh, thank you so much for being here, Karen. Actually, I just realized who you are. Yes. So yeah, so that's why we're here. Foster parents are supposed to have a group that comes together. I know of the one in Broward, but even then I have a lot of family and friends because my grandma was a foster parent. And I have a lot of family and friends in Broward County, which none of them could get my kids when they were in care, which speaks volumes to me. And they take care of many other kids and they weren't able to get my own kids. And they're saying there's no support. And a lot of them get fed up and they just give the kids back when they're actually providing a loving home for these children. I mean, treating these kids as if they're their own and they're living good. So there are some good things there. Not everything is completely bad, but we do have to address the things that are bad, which really traumatizes and affects our kids. And we have to remember once again that children become adults. Melina?
Hi, yes, thank you. I was finishing some lunch here, listening. Okay, let me get the camera on. All right, thank you so much. Shakima, I think this is a phenomenal platform that you have of panelists. Everyone, I've met a few of you in person. What I'd like to say first and foremost is everyone here today that was speaking has a hat. They do have a place that they're advocating already, and I appreciate that we're encouraging other people to step forward and find their place of advocacy. And I think that's the most important thing that I could say. I am a mother of 6 children and 4 grandchildren and a new one on the way. So number 5 is coming. So I have number 5. I am a mother who was, as Mr. Tong said, one of those parents that was falsely accused of fictitious by proxy. But with the help of some organizations like Families Against Court Travesties, peers like yourself, Shakima, who showed up in court with me to make sure I was never alone, which is one of the things I do tell parents all the time. Never go into the fire alone. You never go into the courtrooms alone. Always have a peer with you, support with you, because what they say, they will change what they say. They will turn the recordings off. But today, I do agree with the things that were said about we are trying to use the Family First Prevention Services Act, but it is a crumb. It is a crumb. I actually sat with I was one of the parents I'm from the state of Florida. So I was one of the parents that got to come up and were asked the questions about this bill when it was being implemented and written. My name is not on the bill, but I do have several sentences that I see that are mine. And, you know, my children and I will, you know, cherish that part that we did make some changes. But the problem is that ASFA still exists. So now you have two bills in place, two funding streams. So the best way I could, in layman's terms, I'm not a lawyer, I'm not a legal person. So the best way I can describe what's happening in our system now is you have 9/10 go towards ASFA to remove, to foster, and to incentives to adopt a child out. And then now we have this 1/10 where they can a very few portion that the children and families can get the services and not have to remove. And that's where we need to make, to me, my role of advocacy is to see those dollars transition more to the Families First Prevention and less towards the incentivizing of removing and fostering an adoption. But I just want to thank each of you. I see a lot of passion here, and I think rightfully so, because we are affecting children. One of my oldest statements I have made for as long as I can remember, children grow up and children become adults. If you mess up the children, you'll have messed up adults. So we need to get a grip on this. And I just want to thank you for having this segment. I appreciate the invite to it, and I'm certainly a willing participant and in the area that I can, utilizing my advocacy skills. So thank you.
Do you want to speak about facts, Melina?
Oh, I absolutely would. So right now, under the NOW, National Organization of Women, we do have a chapter that's Families Against Court Travesties. And we just did a webinar on the importance of bringing awareness to re-victimizing domestic violence victims. So parents that are survivors or trying to get out of domestic situations, case in point, again, what brought my original case into care is being a parent that stepped up and finally got the courage to make the phone call. Once I made that phone call, all they could see was 3 beautiful children and tickets on their head that these children were sellable. Just within a matter of a month, they had told 2 different foster homes that they would be adopting my children. When all of it started, because I wanted to protect my children, and I finally got the courage to call the system for that help. So Families Against Court Travesties came along in my life when I had gotten all my children back in 2008. Things were going well, but one of my children, I have 2 different fostering stories. One was great. I'm still friends with those foster family that my children were in. And the other foster home my child was sexually abused in. When she came home, there were all sorts of problems. I got the wraparound services. She was introduced, or when she went into a particular grade, she got a do-gooder teacher who saw my court document that I had been reunified and whatever, and decided that all my child's problems were because of me. So the system came in. There was a 4 years of one child being out of my home, out of 6 children, two had grown up. Never had they been all asked or believed about the circumstances, the systems that I had in place, the wraparounds. Nobody believed all that. Anyway, long story short, it took 4 years for them finally, after, because part of the diagnosis of fictitious by proxy is if you remove the child gets better. Well, in fact, my child got worse. So, and all the behaviors that they accused me of, my child exhibited time and time and time and time again in the system until finally, after several Baker Acts, they said, here, take your child back. And we're sorry we ever put you through this. So now I'm in a litigation. So Mr. Tong, I'll be reaching out to you. So I'll be reaching out. But this has, so the paradigm shift, which is what Ms. Glover asked me to speak about. I apologize for being long-winded to get to there. Families Against Court Travesties, I found the pamphlet in the courthouse and I asked them to do a court watch. When they started appearing in my court, they went from a very demonstrative type of position, having me shut up, calling me a cancer in the courtroom, to everything, to then starting to say, we understand, Mom. We're apologizing to you, Mom. So the shift in the way that they treated me changed. Obviously, it still took time because the system never wants to admit wrong. But at some point, with my child continuing to act out and becoming worse, they finally had to own up to it before it got any more. They just said, here's your child back. I will say to parents who are reunified, congratulations. It's not necessarily a win. It is the right thing for you to have your children back. But I can earnestly say, as a mother who has a almost 16-year-old, it has been a huge challenge because of the parent alienation that occurs while they're out of your care and the damage that is psychologically done to them. Like Miss Sarah had said earlier, she can't imagine if other kids are talking to them and saying, where's your parent, when you have a foster parent who may not be of the same culture, why aren't you with your mom, which raises feelings. And then you have a system telling them your parent is worthless to some degrees. So I'm just glad y'all are here, and I didn't mean to take up your time, but Families Against Court Travesties, you can look under factscourtwatch.org. And you can go there and see how our system works. We are starting to build legislature to make sure that all dependency and family court hearings are mandated to be recorded, because we still have holes in that system as well. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much, Melina. And next we have Walter.
Hi, Shakima. I just wanted to thank you very much for your courage and tenacity in putting this together, putting this organization together and hosting this event, the first of many, I hope, in the future. So thank you very much for your passion, your drive, your commitment. It's really exciting to see. And I look forward to, I heard all the voices. We do need systemic change. We do need change. There's room for and a place for individual casework as well. And so I look forward to all of us working together. Thank you very much. Really exciting time. Thank you, Shakima.
Thank you so much, Walter. And Walter is actually an attorney in Broward County's legal aid. Walter? Yes.
That is correct. That is correct. Legal aid service of Broward County.
So there you go.
In the children's unit, where we represent children as their attorney. We do direct representation for children.
Yes, definitely. And that's another thing that we're going to be working on, is to get more attorneys. Someone needs to do. So that's another thing that we're going to be pushing for in the state of Florida, is that kids get representation. So I was lucky to be able to get representation for my kids, especially the two that had disabilities. My son was born premature. He was born in an incubator at St. Mary's Hospital when he was born. And the long-term effects, no one knew. And now we see that he has like an intellectual disability. But through all of that, the system came, and my kids, especially my son, did not know how to really express himself very well. And during foster care, my daughter started having behavioral issues. So it was really, really great to have representation from Walter's team, because I was on the verge of being TPR, that stands for termination of parental rights. At that time, they were being forced and encouraged to terminate parents' rights. So I just learned that there's a termination of parental right bill that passed that allows parents that were TPR to be able to go back and fight back for their rights and get their children. And I know of one young lady that so far she's actually doing that, and she's actually won visitation so far. And it's been 6 years since she's been alienated by the system from her children, placed with her ex, who actually continued to abuse these young ladies. I mean, so I have several hospital visits and all sorts of things, and I don't understand why the system never removed. So definitely that's something we're going to be working on, Walter, and I'll definitely be reaching out with you and probably Miss Christina, so we can get attorneys for these kids and proper representation for these children. So anyone else have any other comments, statements, questions, or anything? All right, well, seeing none, we're kind of ahead of time, which is pretty okay, because this is our first discussion of many to come. So we definitely will have other discussions with topics and speakers to come along. And advocacy activists always encourage volunteers, because this is a lot of work and it's very hard to do this work. Even though I'm still going through things, I make the time because I see the importance, I see the relevance, I see the cycling through, I see the recidivism. I've spoken to parents. I have another parent. She actually worked at this time. So maybe next time we can do a little later meeting, because that's the next thing. A lot of parents have to jump through hoops. And once they're forced to jump through these hoops, they're so afraid to even step outside of the bounds of just working and taking care of the kid, or just living in fear consistently. So they make no time to educate themselves. And I try to bring that education through my advocacy support group. Advocacy Activists is actually going to become an official organization so that we can start employing those families within the system. Because one thing I found that once I was arrested, it was very hard for me to get a job. Right now, I'm just working through staffing agencies because nobody would hire me just because I have a background, even though I've never been convicted of anything. So I have been out of work for a while now. Even my job, my night job at the hospital, I was there per diem while I was working another job. And that other job fired me, because of that, one reason because of that, even though that's not what it cite on my paperwork, according to unemployment. But my night job, I spoke to my supervisor. She was very understanding. She let me know straight up, don't apply, because you're going to get fired if they find out. So it's not fair. I didn't do anything wrong. It's very hurtful. And it's a struggle every day to make sure my kids eat. I have a hard time getting the food stamps. They make that hard. I had to go to Washington, D.C. and advocate with legislators in order to get even at least the Medicaid for my children, even though the judge ordered that. That's a stipulation for me to be able to keep my kids. In Broward County is where my case started. Palm Beach County kind of wanted nothing to do with my case. So every time I called them for help with my kids, I get a blind eye. I've been to so many therapists. Sometimes the therapists themselves seem like they need training. So there's a lot of conversations that needs to be had here, because these kids are not accepted in local camps, in local daycares, because the behaviors are not being able to be handled because staff does not have the experience. Even some therapists does not have the experience. I'm definitely going to be pushing for more trauma-informed care workers, social workers, therapists. We need more trauma-informed care people in the system that knows how to handle these kids and not exacerbate their situations by calling, oh, you're not going to be nothing but a little whore, and those type of statements, which can really reactivate that rape experience or anything that a child has been through. I'm living it. I am it. And this is why I'm doing this, because it's not fair for children. Walter and Melina placed their contact information in the chat. I will definitely send out resources for the Birth Parents National Coalition. We are working to build a coalition here in the 60 or 62 counties in Florida. But like I said, I'm knocking on doors and I'm getting doors shut in my face. And I'm so grateful to you all who are here today, because obviously you are the voice and advocates, as you can hear the passion in your voices, and you see what I put up with on a day-to-day basis is a very difficult discussion. Even as a foster parent, anybody and everybody that's involved in this system, and even those who are not, because I know I've knocked on doors to get petitions signed. I have my own petition, which I spoke of earlier on my Advocacy Activists Facebook group page. And a lot of people is like, well, how does that affect me? What I got to do with me? Well, maybe the children need to just behave themselves. Maybe they won't get taken. I hear so much negative things. Oh, when I tell them, well, my children was removed. So what you're trying to say, I did something wrong? Well, you must have had did something because they ain't gonna just take people's kids for no reason. So I hear all the negatives. I've been knocking on doors. I've been going to legislators. I've been told, just play the game. Just play the game and get your kids and stay under the radar. But how do you do that when you're minding your business? You're going to court to support other parents and you become a target. So these are all discussions and on all of you all and many other people that I've met that have stories, even in their personal lives, that you don't want to bring to the forefront because of your position, and that's understandable. That you get it. It's nice to know that you get it, and it's time for us to come together and build our coalition of leaders and advocates and experts that can say, look, this is the issue here. Look, this is what the data says, because it seems like DCF is based on data. So I wrote a letter to DCF last year in conjunction with facts. I asked for their assistance to push this letter out, and we actually got a response back from DCF. And at that time, the Supreme Court had actually put out a executive order on what needed to be done during the pandemic. Well, the state of Florida wasn't doing it because I had parents calling me left and right, but I'm only one person. And that's where, and I have kids at home with drama. I can't keep stopping in the middle of the night or whatever, staying up all hours running to help others. So that's why I created this forum, so that people can come to this forum, get informed, get educated as to what's out there and how they get ideas on how they can best help themselves in their situations. Because like I said, I'm only one person. I just went through, and I'm going through my practicum for community health workers. I really do hope that puts a spin on things for the county. Broward County is always the biggest county when it comes to implementing things. And Miami-Dade is the next county that always pushes out the negative things. So we're in a great spot in the state of Florida because the nation is always looking at Miami and those type of metropolitans. So we can take this opportunity to come together and work with each other so that we can build upon our experiences, not just foster parents, not just the parents only. Those of you who work behind the scenes and have seen these things, if it's anything that you, and understanding your capacity, there's certain things that you're limited to saying and doing. And if that is the case, let us know as parents. Y'all know me, I'll speak up, I'm not afraid. So with that said, I'd love to thank everyone on this forum. This was really great. I'm so elated, excited. I will share out those resources. If you registered, I'll definitely get those to you. And I thank each and every one of you for your time, Dean, Sarah, Christina, and Marie, and all those who attended this forum. Thank you again, and I look forward to more future conversations. Y'all have a blessed day.
Thank you. Have a blessed day.
Thank you.
All righty, that was pretty good. That's pretty good.
Good job.